Thank you everyone for joining. We really appreciate it. We have that you joined our webinar. As you may know, Accelirate is the largest niche provider of process automation services, at least in the United States. We're about 270 plus people, almost touching 300, all the way from India to Colombia to the US. We're very solely focused on process automation and the ecosystem. So I think it's been a while since we did our webinars. We figured we'd start this program up again, and I think it was a good topic to discuss. We've seen some interesting trends within the automation ecosystem. So we figured that'd be a good place to start back up our webinars. So your host today, my name is Ahmed Zaidi. I'm the CEO, but more importantly, I'm the Chief Automation Officer here at Accelirate as well. I like to keep my hands dirty. So I have with me Senior Director of Emerging Technologies, Robert Booth. Previously, he was responsible for running our process discovery practice within the company. So RJ, say hello, please.
Thanks, Ahmed. Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for joining. So, as Ahmed mentioned, as CEO likes to be in the trenches, I'm in the kind of the same way, but more for emerging tech, where I'm constantly always looking for new products, new technologies, and the business problems they're trying to solve. So hopefully we'll be able to provide some context and some valuable information to you all today.
Perfect. So what we figured, again, look, I think just talking about emerging technologies overall is a topic that's kind of, a lot of times can be very futuristic. Our approach towards everything has been pragmatic since the beginning. We're not pie in the sky type people. So if you're expecting to hear today on how we're going to get to Mars and start life there, probably not. But in the automation ecosystem, I think we've seen some advancements, and we'll talk about that. I think there's a few trends that, from our automation perspective, we've seen very specifically in the process automation space, and I think, and again, the audience here may or may not already feel that, hey, we were leaders in this. We were already doing this way back, and then there's some folks who are saying, hey, we should start doing this. So specifically, what we saw in the past few years, I think 17 onwards, as RPA specifically took on a lot of noise and a lot of spotlight, we saw that a lot of the companies, had this concept of the RPA COE, and you had folks that would set up a whole group that was focused on automation. A lot of times the RPA COE was called the Automation Initiative. We saw initially that those COEs, the core focus was RPA, and a lot of RPA-based automations were kind of the bread and butter. Early on, we saw a lot of, some enterprises start adding capabilities, but still most of the focus of that automation COE revolved around RPA being the core tool of choice. Over the past few years, we've seen that, the automation COEs have really, I think these days, I don't think anyone calls it the RPA COE anymore. Almost everyone calls it the automation COE. And there are a few capabilities that are kind of sort of standard that we'll talk about, document processing, process mining, task mining. These are sort of things that have been added to the automation COE. And I think the capabilities have grown beyond RPA, and we've seen that a lot of folks have actually added those additional capabilities beyond RPA into the automation COEs, and I think that's becoming very mainstream these days. RJ, anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's just to add kind of already to your sentiment that RPA as a tool obviously has proven itself for enterprises, but as things progress, as businesses change, as they always do, your toolkit and your tool set and methodology needs to change with it. So a lot of COE, well, pretty much every COE that wants to grow and expand is expanding their toolkit. They realize that RPA is not going to be the only tool that you need to have in order to really instill and evangelize automation. Automation is not RPA. RPA is a type of automation technology. And, it's very important to make that delineation. I think now, especially post-COVID, that delineation is only becoming more and more clear as certain use cases for certain automation technologies are starting to really grow, and we'll obviously go into that.
Makes sense. That's good to know. So that's one big thing that we've added. The other emerging trend I think that's been interesting is, look, I think OCR has been around for quite a while. I don't think that has changed. I think there have been various groups within a enterprise, and those enterprises who are sort of document heavy had a focus on it, and they were, a lot of IT-led initiatives in terms of automated document processing and OCR platforms and document indexing platforms, so on and so forth. They were all there were separate initiatives for those things, but what our observation has been is that intelligent document processing has become sort of a part of the process automation story, right? We're seeing, and I think the impetus has been a couple of things. I think especially as the RPA platforms create more tighter integrations with IDP platforms. I think there's somewhat last count I took of well-known IDP platforms. There were 35 of them, right? And I think RPA itself, and we did a whole webinar on it, that RPA itself gave a new life to the OCR in general, right? So OCR in general became a focus just because so many processes really it's involved the document in it, that it became, as you finished up the stuff that addressed the processes that start with an Excel spreadsheet or start in the structured data system, so on and so forth, you were left with a lot of these processes that require document processing. And I think intelligent document processing has become sort of a de facto capability that needs to be within any RPA or automation COE. I think, and we've seen tremendous amounts of focus on document processing within the automation space per se. I think every automation platform that you talk about, that you think that is worth mentioning, will say something about how they can handle documents, right? And every IDP platform will make sure that they tell you that they have integrations into RPA platforms. So that's number one, the document processing. The second portion of that is the Ipass, even both, things like MuleSoft, Jitterbit, those type of integration platforms as a service, as well as the low code type ones like the Power Automates and the Workatos and those of the world. I think we've seen increased adoption of both of those things within the enterprise and sub-enterprise as well. I think we've seen quite a bit of adoption within automation programs of these two things. RJ, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, just to, again, kind of echo some of the sentiments that you made, just starting with IDP, it's OCR reclassified, right? OCR has been around for forever. IDP is another kind of spin on it. And there are certain characteristics that make a tool be classified under that IDP, in my opinion. But, just to be very blunt, if you are in an industry or you're working in an area that has a lot of documentation, BFSI, healthcare, even retail, and you don't have an IDP capability, you're already being left behind. It's just as simple as that. You can't automate anything without accessible data. And if you don't have an IDP solution, you'll have a majority of your data non-accessible, or even worse, being manually indexed. So from the IDP side, that's at least how I see it. From the Ipass perspective, it's becoming an API world. So Ipass is obviously becoming more and more commonplace, especially bridging the gap between back office and front office operations.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And the third thing I think, interestingly, we also added that as a capability, and it was more so because people were asking us for it. I think the data initiatives in organizations, again, this is not old, right? Data integration, this is not new. Data integration has been happening for ages and ages and ages, right? Data warehouses and moving data and ETL platforms and ELT platforms, so on and so forth. I think what's new is the adoption of cloud-based platforms, is the focus away from really setting up the infrastructure and all of that for data integration, and using some of these things, be it RPA, be it Ipass. I mean, we see so many implementations of Ipass platforms throwing data upon events into cloud-based data warehousing platforms or data lakes or whatever, however you do it, but cloud-based platforms that enable data integration. I think things like Databricks or Snowflake have really taken up. And again, you can this is very, very evident in the market cap and the valuations of these companies as well. So I think those are the three big trends that I think we're seeing in the market. Any thoughts on the data side of things, RJ?
Really just to add kind of what you said, I would really, in healthcare, it's they have their own term for it, and interoperability, but I feel like that concept is applying across many other industries. The data is king. So your architecture that is holding that data and how it is being accessed, being able to optimize that, it's just that foundational layer. So I agree with everything you said. That would be the only thing that I would add to it, is that the concept of interoperability, which has been so common in healthcare the past 10 years, that's something that is really coming to play in some of the other industries now that it's been taken such precedence.
Perfect. So I think in my opinion, I kind of divide up our discussion into two or three areas. One is I think there have been trends, sort of emerging trends. Talking emerging trends, there've been trends in both, not just emerging technologies, but emerging trends in the way people do modernization strategy, process discovery, and process and task mining. And I'll give that to RJ in a little bit to talk about. And then there are obviously implementation trends that we're seeing, and I'll talk a little bit about what I'm seeing in the implementation trends. And I think we've talked about some of these things. And the last bucket is your data solutions trend, right? The data integration, business intelligence. We'll talk about, again, from our observation. Just keep in mind that we're talking about it from an automation standpoint. These are, again, data solutions isn't new, right? People have been doing it for quite a while. It's how are the automation programs feeding into data integration efforts within the organization? That's really what we're talking about in the trends we're seeing there. So with that, I'll get a little bit into the weed of things and let RJ talk about what he's seeing sort of from a process discovery and process mining standpoint. Go ahead, RJ.
Thanks, Ahmed. So I mean, first, before I guess that's that first bullet point, in terms of process discovery and what that really classifies as, if you were to go on Google right now and you put in the term process discovery, you'll probably get a bunch of different definitions, and more than likely you're going to see a lot of process mining tools that go within it. Process discovery, to me and to my practice and ultimately to how we view automation, it's the strategic approach to identifying opportunities for automation across an enterprise. Businesses change all the time. Tech changes even faster. You need to have a methodology in place that understands, well, what are the capabilities of these tools? What are the business problems I'm trying to solve? And you need to marry those two concepts. So that as a whole is what process discovery really aims to be. To me, process discovery is a methodology that encompasses tools. Now, having said that, as a methodology, or as a practice, as time has gone on, there has been a real growth in terms of the amount of tools that are available for the COEs that are really trying to introduce automation to their organization. If you're talking, let's say 5 years ago, when you were talking about RPA, back then I remember I wrote one of my first ever articles was on how RPA and Citrix, how they didn't get along and what were the ways that you would go around that, right? And now in today's day and age, that's something that could be solved easily. So if you take that concept and then apply it, in terms of discovery, there's a lot of more opportunities for automation. Yes, sure, maybe you won't get straight through processing. Maybe you won't have an unattended bot that automates everything. That's fine. But you're able to now increase the scope of the opportunities that you find for automation because you have things like human in the loop processing, because you have intelligent document processing that allows you to index more data than you ever had before. You're able to utilize tools like Ipass that are able to integrate via APIs on the back end and then still leverage tools like RPA more on the front end for quick UI automations. The scope of the scope of solutions that relate to automation and the tools within them has only broadened, and it'll continue to broaden. So that's really the purpose of having a methodology in place, is because it allows you to change with the industry, which is always changing. So that would be my first bullet point. The second, and this is just a fundamental one, is shorter cycles. This is in everything, not just discovery. There are shorter cycles in absolutely everything. I remember when we, one of our first big programs was RPA 90X. And the concept was simple, that we will get your automations up and running in 3 months, 3 to 5 automations in 3 months. That concept is applying across all of these other technologies as well as these methodologies. So, the days of, oh, let's go do discovery on this department for the next 6 months, those are gone. Those are no longer going to be commonplace, and that's just an archaic way of doing it. Shorter cycles means that you're doing things very agile. You're always aligning with what are the business objectives, but you're also getting constant feedback, that constant feedback loop, because things change so much over time. That's really from the methodology. From the tool perspective, that concept still is applied regardless of whether it's IDP, Ipass, conversational AI, mining. The question is no longer, can you do this? The question is, how quickly can you do it? Time to value is absolutely everything. And if you're utilizing tools, you have a methodology that does not take into consideration how long it will take to implement, how long it will take to identify, insert whatever word you want to use there, you're going to really be putting yourself at a detriment. Because this is the name of the game now, is moving fast. And you need to make sure you move fast while keeping that quality there. That's why methodology is there, and you use tools to help you with that. But fundamentally, one of the key trends for discovery, and I think automation in general, is the shorter life cycles across the board. Next is really related to value. And I think this is a trend that really started taking center stage since COVID. I've been in automation my entire career, and I can tell you that before COVID, almost every COE we went to, every corporation I've worked with, almost every business case was linked to some type of direct or hard ROI, cost savings, throughput increase, etc. Almost all of them had to be tied to that for benchmarking purposes, to understand, well, what value am I getting versus my initial outlay, etc. But post-COVID, things have changed, and they've changed pretty radically in terms of how we look at value. Value this is becoming, at least from my perspective, more and more commonplace, that value is no longer tied to direct ROI. And instead, the majority of my clients that I have for discovery, in fact, almost all of them say the exact same thing, in the sense that I am not here looking for direct cost reduction. What I'm here looking for is, I want my team to be able to do more with what they already have. I want them to be able to achieve more, and more importantly, I want their employee experience and the customer experience to take center stage. And that's something that is definitely a change in the dynamic than what it looked like pre-COVID, where it was almost always a cost play or productivity play in some aspect. Now, the way that I see COEs are looking is, how can I use these tools to better broaden how my employees are working? Because obviously right now, labor shortages, those are all factors you need to take into consideration. But also, how am I able to enhance the customer experience, increase potential revenue, increase potential sales with automation? It's changing the dynamic a bit from a pure cost savings perspective to an actually revenue generating strategic perspective in terms of value. And I think that's something that is a huge trend from a discovery perspective that I wanted to outline. Now going into the next, process and task mining, right? These are tools. Process discovery is the methodology. Process and task mining are tools that go within that process discovery world. These are something that over the past 3 years specifically, they've taken, they've gained a lot of popularity. Not just in terms of adoption, but in terms of capability, in terms of evangelization. You know, I remember circa 2018, 2019, that process mining, specifically Celonis, was a tool that I was researching at the time. They were huge in Europe, but it just wasn't something that you really saw here in the Americas. And that dynamic has just switched completely. Again, I feel COVID really accelerated that, no pun intended, in the sense that process mining and task mining allows you to see insights. Now, insights are not a treatment. Insights are just showing you the current state of your organization. But because now, after COVID and how things have changed so massively in our working environment, tools like process mining are beginning to bridge the gap from the Fortune 500s, where they usually normally resided, into those SMB type organizations, because they're able to see insights they never had before. So in terms of adoption, I think process mining is where RPA was at around 2016, 2017, where it was just getting into that initial boom. Tools like Celonis, even UiPath process mining, Mineit, all of these tools are starting to gain a lot of popularity. And in my opinion, I think in the next 5 years, process and task mining will really start to take a center stage as it relates to automation, because I personally feel every automation should have a correlated mine alongside it, or at least in consideration of it, to really see that end-to-end view.
I think it was interesting as we were talking in prep for this. You had mentioned something that's interesting. Process mining is where RPA was about 4 or 5 years ago. Is that what you're thinking, RJ?
Yeah, that's I mean, so I got into this industry 2004, 2015. So this is when UiPath Orchestrator kind of just first came out. And from there to 2017, there was a big change, but it wasn't a huge fundamental. But 2017 to 2019, it skyrocketed. I really feel process mining is in that exact same scenario, where organizations are starting to see it's not that that I want it, it's that my organization needs it. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to over these next couple of years, obviously from a discovery perspective.
Perfect.
Now, the next point, it goes hand in hand with the first one. Process mining, task mining, these are insight tools. They, you know, if I always like to use an analogy in terms of going to a doctor. You know, process mining and task mining are like an X-ray. They can tell you and they can confirm to you what exactly is wrong, but they don't treat it. It's not the treatment. Tools like RPA, tools like IDP, Ipass, Conversational AI, those types of tools are the treatment. But process mining, task mining, it's the insights that goes around everything that allows you to understand, well, what is the actual change? What's the improvement I've made from day 1 to day 60, or, you know, whatever it may be in your continuous improvement initiative. So I think these go hand in hand. But obviously, as process mining adoption goes up, continuous improvement initiatives beyond just automation, I'm talking Six Sigma, I'm talking anything as it relates to continuous improvement, are going to go along with it. And lastly, the last point that I wanted to say, and this is relating specifically to task mining. Process mining was the fundamental technology that started out. Task mining kind of was an offshoot of that, in the sense that process mining focuses on data logs, very data science heavy, you know, connections, all of those types of things. It focuses on that application layer. Task mining operates on the UI layer, in the sense that it operates on the user interface itself. Now, before, at least a couple of years ago, when I was first initially seeing this and to see where it is today, the algorithms that they were able to create to really showcase the results from a task mining recorder, they were nowhere near as sophisticated as they are now. And I only think that's going to grow in time as data science progresses, as these algorithms progress. They're only going to get better. And I personally think that they'll end up actually being linked, where you'll be able to see from a process perspective, the end to end, and then dive in to individual tasks to see them all the way down to that UI layer, screenshots, etc. But I think in the past 2 years specifically, there has been a huge change in terms of the capability of task mining, making it more applicable in terms of actual scope, industries, etc. That's something that I wanted to point out in the sense that process mining is, like I said, where you know RPA was 5 years ago. I think task mining is a little bit before that, but both of them have their place. And I think the improvements task mining is taking, along with process mining, are going to be fundamental for discovery and automation in general.
Perfect. Thank you, RJ. So whereas RJ was talking, you know, as I mentioned earlier, RJ has the responsibility on our process discovery practice as well as emerging technologies. I think he looks at it from a strategic consulting perspective as well. You know, talking a little bit about the implementation tools and trends we're seeing in the implementation tools. And by the way, I'll pause here for 1 second. I see a few questions. As I pause, I answer the questions, and when I'm talking, RJ will answer some of the questions as well. Sasri, I see your question. We'll try to answer that, and when we get to the data portion of it. And Subra, to your question, yeah, I think RPA platforms are now becoming sort of the one of those platforms that you get. I think all enterprises, even sub enterprises, are realizing that just like you get a ETL platform, just like you get a SharePoint for document, you know, for sharing of documents, you get Jira for incident management, and you know, whatever other platforms you get an RPA platform to do some of the automation that you need to get done. I think it's becoming fairly ubiquitous. I always butcher that pronunciation, but it's pretty much everywhere. I think in fact what I'm seeing is, I think pretty much everywhere, every enterprise has made a choice and implemented something. Some have gone really heavy with it, some haven't. I really think that the challenge of not having an API to a system is not going away, right? So I think that is sort of a big impetus on being able to implement something like this. Yet at the same time, once you start implementing, you go, hey, listen, there's other things I could do with it, might as well, right? So I think there is acceptance of it, but there's also at the same time more awareness of what core systems of record. I think you know, I used to have this rubric early on. You start look first, if you want to automate something, first look at your core system of record and see if it gives you native automation. So if Salesforce is your thing and there's a built-in native automation in Salesforce for some CRM related activity, use that. If not, go to the marketplace for that system of record and see if you can find something there. And then you start looking at other integration capabilities. So I think that thought process is maturing, and that has become more more mature as time has gone. Hopefully that answered your question. So in the same vein, again, in the RPA and AI front, I think we have seen RPA sort of take on the intelligent, the term intelligent is being added in front of RPA, and I think that's, some of it is a little tongue-in-cheek sometimes, I think, but you know, there is a lot more ML-based skill integration. I think regardless of whether the RPA platform itself has built it or somebody else has built it, most RPA platforms now have a way to integrate with some machine learning-based skill, and I think that's really good, right? I think that expands the possibility of what you can and cannot do, how processes that don't have you know, just standard structured data that can be processed on and so forth. And I think the biggest places that we're using that are using those AI skills, I think, still remain to be language processing, some image classifications in very specific areas, and then document processing. Language processing kind of takes the big chunk of, you know, I have emails, I have certain phrases and things like that that are being that I need to to process, how do I process them, so on and so forth. And document processing is sort of integration of intelligent IDP platform. But again, if you're using the RPA platform itself, there are some platforms that have that capability built in, but that's where most of the AI is being used. I think the other thing that has become interesting is, as one of the big things I saw happen over the past few years is that RPA platforms added human in the loop functionality a little bit more integrated into the platform. So we saw a lot of advancements in that human in the loop functionality, which means that enabled a lot of the human in the loop learning capability. I think data science guys are having a great time by being able to actually capture all the data that you need that wasn't available possibly in the same way that you had in previous in regular systems, but now you have the ability to capture more granular data, whether that be about a document and where a field is located on a document, or whether that is, I have this particular input and this is the decision output, so on and so forth, right? So I think those human in the loop has opened up a whole big sort of avenue for automation and being able to collect data and within the process. We talked a little bit about intelligent document processing. I think for those who, I think pretty much everyone here knows what that is, but it's different than OCR. OCR is, for instance, the ability of your, kindergartner or first grader to be able to look at characters and be able to identify this is an A, this is a B, this is a C, and where it is on the page and what that word is possibly by being able to read characters. That's OCR. But the understanding of what the word invoice means and where it is and what's an invoice number and how it's followed and where the subtotal is, that's the understanding of a document, and that's what intelligent document processing refers to. What used to happen and still happens quite often is, you have a document that's always in the same form. If you have that, you'd extract text out of it and you write some rules to say, the thing after this text is that, and the 8 characters that you see that are numbers after this text is this. So that was the 7-year-old way of finding invoice numbers and subtotals. But intelligent document processing generally refers to the ability of extracting data and classifying documents through intelligent machine learning models, right? One of the big things that we're seeing is, again, I think people are coming to terms with the fact that there's not going to be 100% straight through processing with intelligent document processing. RJ's smiling there because he's been through that. I think we've seen people finally realize that, hey, listen, I think if we can do 80% STP, we're golden. We have 80% less work to do. And for that 20%, if we can take out the mundane data entry portion of the process and just have the human read the document and validate it, even better yet. So on that 20%, we might still be 80% more efficient, even though there's a human involved. So, I think that's really been sort of, again, if you look at the last one on the RPA side, those two are kind of connected. The feedback loop integration has been greatly enhanced in pretty much all intelligent document processing platforms. And I think that's something that people look for right off the bat. I think, at least for us, when we're looking at a IDP platform integration, that's something that we're very, very particular about. What is the feedback loop? What is the human in the loop factor on that platform, and how does the platform learn from it? Right, those are big things. The third thing that we've seen is pre-trained models. I think that had been very prevalent in very specific industries. So, for example, mortgage industry, it had pre-trained models for a lot of mortgage documents. We had pre-trained models for a lot of the insurance industry, so on and so forth. I think you're seeing more generic pre-trained models of things like passports, and the interesting thing that you're seeing is that these are now either included within the IDP platform or your RPA platform, so on and so forth. I think that the number of pre-trained models that you have for utility bills and invoices and identification documents and things like that are you can find a lot of them. So, talking about Ipass and workflow automation, just for those who are sort of not familiar with the Ipass term, integration platform as a service, things that go into it really are, your Workados. They could be low-code integration platforms as a service, which I would put Workado, Power Automate, Zapier, for instance. They're all sort of in that bucket of integration platforms running in the cloud, ability to give you API connectivity between systems. And then there are the more code-based Ipass platforms, the Jitterbits, the Boomies, the MuleSoft, which require a bunch of coding to do to manage to do the integration. But either way, regardless of which one you look at, I think Ipass platforms have as people are doing automation COEs are now have these platforms as a part of them, or enterprise integration services. I've seen they've done a lot of adaptation of those, and either the RPA guys are using it, the automation guys are more used to the fact that there are these Ipass platforms and workflow automation platforms available that do API-based integration. So those are being used more and more, and we've seen a lot of adoption of that. That's just very, very, you can just look at funding and growth and revenue of a lot of these platforms, and you can see that adoption has been there. What's interesting also is each one of these platforms will say that they have a partnership with the RPA and RPA platform, which is interesting, right? So you have API-based integration, but at the end of the day, there are still systems, as I mentioned earlier, the Subra's question, there are systems that don't have APIs. And I think that has always been a challenge. And so you always need that integration between the RPA platform and the Ipass platform, and we're seeing a lot of RPA integration and programs that have both in action. RJ, anything I missed on those three?
No, the only thing I would probably add in the IDP space, and this is just something that I've been seeing recently that's pretty fascinating, is that similar to the pre-trained models, right? If you're in an industry where you're, in terms of documentation, it's pretty fixed in terms of overall scenarios. Tools that are built in within RPA and other, they're probably going to suffice. Now, if you're operating in doc-heavy industries, talking healthcare or anything in BFSI, for example, the question now is what the IDP solution that you are looking at. The question you should be asking is, how long does it take to train a model? And that's something that has changed a lot, because before it was, well, how accurate is your model, right? But almost every tool, if it's worth their salt, is going to get at least to that 80, 85, 90% mark, right? The question is now, how quickly can I train that model? And, there are some tools that I personally, that I work with where the sample size to build a model is as low as 10. Whereas before, we were talking hundreds, if not thousands, to get to that 80, 90% threshold. And you have to keep in mind that sample size is based upon per variant or per model, right? If you're dealing with, you need to have a dozen different models and you're taking 100 or 1,000 samples for each to get to an 80% confidence interval, that it's going to take too long. The game is shifting to now it's not just time to value, but time to model creation, if you will. I think that's something that, especially if you're in one of those industries that is doc heavy, where you need to focus on that when you're looking at particular vendors and you're looking at some of these solutions, that's a question you should ask. What is that time to model creation? And what is that correlated, acceptance rate, confidence interval, whatever vernacular they would like to use.
Perfect. No, I think that's perfect, RJ. That's a common theme that we've seen across a lot of our engagements. In the last portion that we talked about, again, data and analytics. Nothing new in data. I mean, data and analytics have been around for, data warehousing platforms have been around for quite a while. Of course, all businesses a process and data. You're moving data around from one place to another. What we've seen really change in the past few years is, I think, the nature of data platforms moving from moving from a, your very traditional ETL methodology to ELT type methodology. And so, Sastry, happy to connect you with our data experts. But I think the ELT methodology, as well as using cloud-based platforms and taking away the focus from, I got to set this to the ODS and that for the cubes and that's for these servers for this, taking away the whole infrastructure away and using those cloud-based data lakes or data warehousing platforms or data and analytics platforms like the Snowflakes or like Databricks, and then putting on top of it reporting and visualization platforms. That's a whole different story. But what we're seeing is adoption of those cloud-based platforms become a lot more. And again, it just followed the whole cloud adoption, generally speaking. But that has taken the data space by storm. And I think we're seeing a lot more. I think the big theme in everything that we've seen is time to value. People have been very, very, very particular about time to value, right? Again, the big theme that we're seeing, the emerging trend that we're seeing, especially in the automation space. Look, building capability is building capability. People understand if I need to implement a new system, it's going to take me a certain amount of time to do it. The strategic initiative of going from SAP ECC to SAP HANA, they're happening. They're like everybody's doing one of those things. There's still those core initiatives that are happening, but specifically in the IT space, in the automation space, we're seeing that the shortened cycle, the time to value is front and center for everyone. They're like, yeah. I mean, if you're going to tell me this is going to be an 18-month thing and it's 6 months of analysis, I'm going to go and give this to IT and spin off an IT project for it. But if the expectation from the automation COE is much more, I would need to get this very quickly sort of implemented in a shortened cycle. That's really the underlying theme that we're seeing in most automation programs. So I think that's the last slide I had. Any questions? So Sastry, for your question that you'd asked, right? Intelligent extraction of data at scale. I think especially when data sets are diverse, you need to use. I think the cloud platforms provide a good ability. Again, data lakes and such are being increasingly used for just that purpose by itself, right? So I think that's been a big change, and happy to put you in touch with our data experts to go to talk through some of the techniques they've used for intelligent extraction of data at scale. Somebody's asked a question around conversational AI platforms and Ipass. It's interesting. I've seen a few of these now, right? I think chatbots are not new. I think conversational AI platforms is a euphemism for a chatbot, I guess. Look, they've been around for a while. People have used them. What I've seen is, in fact, I think a low-code integration platform with chatbots. I think what we've seen, the chatbots that we've seen really gain success are the ones that are purpose-built. I think those always have better success than the ones that are, that try to bite off too much and just be generic. So we've seen a lot of success in very purpose-built understanding of a particular domain. What we're seeing, in fact, though, is integration of conversational AI platforms and chatbots with RPA bots, which is, again, I've always said this: if you're going to expose something that you can do on the website through a chatbot, I don't know if that has a lot of value. Because I don't need my Bank of America Erica thing to ask me 18 questions before it can do a transfer, right? I can do a transfer very quickly. But when I need to figure out where my, what the status of a check stop payment that I did, or something that I cannot do self-service, generally that is the case is that the system that you need information from, it doesn't have an API or you can't expose it. So we're seeing a lot of RPA platforms fill that gap and be able to expose these platforms that don't have APIs to chatbots and conversational AI platforms, and be able to service intents that could previously not be serviced through APIs. All right, any other questions?
One thing I would add to that, Amit, in terms of the conversational AI that I've seen as well, and again, like you were saying, it's almost kind of just a fancy way of saying chatbots, right? But one thing that I have seen over the past couple of years that's changed is that whenever you think chatbots, conversational AI, whatever you like to call it, right? You're thinking front office. You're thinking from business user to customer, right? Customer is the one doing that interaction majority of the time, and then it's auto routed to somebody, within the internal to the business. What I've actually have been seeing, specifically in the past year, just with the newer technologies that I've been working with, is using conversational AI also for internal operations. That's something that I've also found very, very interesting in the sense that, and think of a call center, for example, right? A call center, if you're really talking about in terms of customer support, the main purpose of that is relationship management. That's the entire reason that you have that line. If not, you would just have it as an automated system, right? So the name of the game is, how am I able to have my employee, the coordinator, whatever's the term you would like to use for them, how do I have them focus as much time on the customer as possible? Now, I've seen conversational AI being able to be utilized for those purposes. You always want that single pane of glass, of course, right? But there are some one-off instances of where they may ask for a certain request that I may have to pull up this system to figure that out.
Yep.
I've seen that where conversational AI platforms, especially ones that integrate with Ipass solutions, which are becoming much more commonplace, are being utilized and leveraged in internal operations that have external focus or external face. That's something I think I've been seeing.
That's a good observation. It's been happening in large organizations early on. I think it has caught on to more enterprises and sub-enterprises. I think gives you a better, again, because chatbots have such a conversational AI has such a potential of leaving a bad customer experience. If a customer service agent who's internal just doesn't have a good experience, it's okay. It's more manageable than if your customer had that experience. So that's good. Any other questions? If you have any other questions, feel free to either put them in chat or put them in the Q&A. We have a few minutes left. So it was really good to be able to talk to you today, RJ, on this topic. Feel free to reach out to us. Our email address is out there, either through our website or through that email address. If there are no other questions, I think we can come to an end. We'll pause for a couple of seconds here to see if someone's typing something. If not, you can feel free to reach out to us, either LinkedIn or however you got this particular link. We appreciate you joining. All right, RJ, thank you very much. It was great speaking with you.
As always, yes, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, as well. Love talking about emerging tech and especially automation. So looking forward to the next one.
Have a good afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.